I never thought keeping my basement dry would cost me $50,000. That was the fine Amy Scott, our HOA president, slapped on me for building a dam that had saved my house and my neighbor Roberts from flooding for 3 straight years. Amy, a real estate attorney who knew exactly how to twist municipal codes, smirked when the court order arrived. "You'll learn not to mess with HOA authority," she told me. She wasn't wrong. I did learn something. Just not the lesson she thought. My house sits at the lowest point of our cul-de-sac, a natural basin where every spring storm swells the creek out back and turns my yard into a shallow lake. Gravity doesn't care about landscaping budgets. For years, Robert and I waged our annual war against water with shop vacs, sump pumps, and late-night cursing, while the middle section residents, including Amy, enjoyed dry homes and offered smug advice about better drainage. Easy to say when water flows away from your foundation, not into it. I spent 40 years as an electrician, studying how systems behave and how to redirect current when it takes the wrong path. Water, like electricity, always chooses the path of least resistance. One brutal storm sparked the idea. I could build a retention dam at the creek's narrow bottleneck. Nothing fancy, just concrete and common sense. Robert helped me pour the foundation, and together we created a small pond system that held water during storms and released it slowly afterward. For 3 glorious years, our basement stayed dry, our lawns usable. It was the most satisfying project I'd done since retirement. Then came the letter. The HOA accused me of constructing an unauthorized structure that endangered community drainage. 50 grand in fines. As if I'd committed a crime by protecting my home. A few days later, another envelope arrived, this one from Harold's nephew. Harold Whitman had been HOA president decades earlier, long before Amy. Inside were his notes from 1995, maps and calculations about our neighborhood's drainage flaws. Harold had seen the same dangers I had. He'd even highlighted the middle section as a potential flood zone. That puzzled me. The middle section sat on higher ground than my property. Why would it be at risk? Amy proposed a compromise. She'd bring in a civil engineer, Linda Wilson, for an objective assessment. I agreed. Linda showed up in a hard hat, surveying equipment in hand, and seemed professional enough. She asked detailed questions about my dam, ran calculations, and confirmed what I already knew. My design reduced peak flow by 60%. From a pure engineering standpoint, it worked. Yet she spent weeks obsessively documenting upstream areas, measuring every angle, even installing weather monitors. When her official report finally came in, it conveniently left out the most alarming discovery: that an old drainage tunnel downstream was woefully undersized, clogged with debris, and incapable of handling storm flow for a neighborhood that had tripled in size. Harold had flagged the same bottleneck 30 years ago, and now Linda had seen it too. But she chose not to mention it. Amy doubled down, commissioning her own glossy engineering report from a firm tied to her law practice. This new study painted my modest concrete structure as a ticking time bomb that threatened the entire neighborhood. At a community meeting stacked with Amy's supporters, Linda stood up in her safety vest, lending credibility to Amy's claims while carefully avoiding any mention of the drainage bottleneck she had documented. It was manipulation dressed as professionalism. Then things turned darker. Someone broke into Harold's nephew's house and stole only the old drainage papers. Nothing else. The timing was too perfect, just days after the meeting. Whoever took them knew exactly what they were looking for. Meanwhile, meteorologists began warning of unusual storm patterns. Linda, instead of showing concern, seemed almost eager, preparing her own basement like she knew something bigger was coming. I followed the court order to remove my dam, though every instinct told me it was a mistake. I documented everything, hired a contractor, and watched 3 years of protection torn apart just 48 hours before forecasts upgraded the coming storm to historic, the most severe since records began. The timing was too precise to be coincidence. Amy's legal maneuvering had lined up perfectly with the weather. It felt orchestrated. I retreated to my brother's house on a ridge overlooking the whole neighborhood. From there, I set up cameras and measurement posts, determined to record what would happen when the skies opened. And they did, right on schedule. Rain hammered down, overwhelming every gutter and drain in the region. Within an hour, my yard filled with water, just like the old days. Robert's basement pumps groaned nonstop. But the real disaster unfolded uphill. At first, water drained toward the middle section as gravity dictated. Then the bottleneck Harold had warned about gave way to physics. The tunnel, too small and half choked with debris, couldn't carry the load. Water backed up, pooling across Amy's pristine lawns and her neighbors' driveways. The middle section transformed into an unintended retention pond. Basements filled, streets vanished under 3 feet of water. And the very people who had demanded my dam's removal were suddenly trapped in the worst flooding the neighborhood had ever seen. My time-lapse cameras captured everything. Bottom homes like mine flooding briefly but draining within hours, while middle section properties sat submerged for days. The numbers told the truth. 18 inches of temporary water below, 36 inches of sustained flooding above. Even Linda's basement filled to the ceiling, drowning her expensive equipment. Professional expertise hadn't saved her from ignoring the obvious. As insurance adjusters waded through ruined living rooms, revelations surfaced. Amy and Linda had both filed past claims for seepage in their own homes, proof they knew about the drainage risks all along. Worse, property records showed Linda had bought her flood-prone house in cash just weeks after Amy first raised complaints about my dam. It wasn't coincidence. It was strategy. Then Harold's nephew uncovered the final piece. A secret recording Harold had made of Amy and Linda during a private HOA session. Their voices were clear, discussing acceptable damage to qualify for federal redevelopment grants. They weren't protecting the neighborhood. They were manufacturing disaster for profit. Linda admitted she could use her engineering credentials to manipulate reports, while Amy promised her legal connections would smooth over licensing issues. They'd planned it for years. Remove the dam, let the flooding happen, apply for grants, and cash in when property values rebounded after federally funded improvements. The storm gave them their disaster, but it also exposed them. The evidence was undeniable. Stolen documents, manipulated reports, secret planning, and now an entire neighborhood underwater. Federal investigators swooped in. Linda's license was suspended, her career effectively ended. Amy faced fraud charges for manipulating disaster programs and deceiving her own community. Neighbors who once cheered her authority now cursed her name as they hauled ruined furniture to the curb. In the aftermath, the city commissioned an independent engineer with no ties to our feud. His report confirmed everything. My dam had been safe, effective, and properly scaled. The real danger lay in the neglected drainage infrastructure Amy and Linda had concealed. The city allocated $2 million to replace the outdated tunnel and rebuild proper flood control. This time, permits were secured, professional oversight enforced, and the community itself voted, unanimously, to reconstruct my dam as part of a comprehensive system. Harold's warnings from 1995 were vindicated at last. 2 years later, I sat at my kitchen window with a mug of coffee and watched a spring storm roll in. Rain fell hard, the creek swelled, but this time the water collected behind a new retention pond with a modern spillway, then drained smoothly through upgraded pipes. My basement stayed dry. So did Robert's. So did the middle section. The system worked as good engineering always does. We learned more than just how to manage water. We learned how easily authority can be abused when people trust credentials without question. We learned that community safety depends on competence, not politics. And we learned that gravity doesn't lie. Water flows where it must, and no legal argument can change that. The storm proved the truth, and the truth, like water, always finds its level.